too late.
A lot of weird stuff happens in X-Men Dark Phoenix. Here are 50 of them. Good and bad. The movie opens in 1975, and you can tell it's 1975 because about 15 different hit 1970 songs play on a car radio in the span of 1 minute. The car radio station keeps changing to establish that Jean couldn't control her powers as a kid. The movie also establishes this by having Jean kill her parents. This is done in a slow-motion car crash scene, exactly like the opening of Shazam. For the first time in the franchise, Jean's force fields are visible, so every time she uses them, people look like they're in giant bubbles. Even though it's established that Jean has had an uncontrollable force inside of her for her entire life in both X-Men Apocalypse and the first scene of this movie, the second scene of this movie shows the Phoenix Force possessing Jean for the first time as an adult. It's revealed that Jean can only control her powers because when she was a little girl, Professor X used his mind control powers to make her forget that she killed her parents. This completely ignores that in X-Men Apocalypse, she was so bad at controlling her powers that other kids avoided her. Professor X's arc is coming to terms with the fact that his lie to Jean is what's causing her to be so emotionally unstable that she can't control her powers. He admits that he realizes it in one scene, and then immediately says it's not his fault after all because Jean is possessed by a giant space bird that's actually making her do this. It's never explained what the Phoenix Force is in any way except that it's from space and that it's old. It's not referred to as the Phoenix Force either. Jean Grey is nicknamed Phoenix since she almost dies but then doesn't. She is told that this is now her nickname, but no one ever calls her Phoenix, or Dark Phoenix. Cyclops wears his visor for literally the entire movie. That's not a criticism, it made me so happy. After a mission in space, Mystique tells Professor X that the women on the team are always saving the men on the team, and says that it might as well be called the X-Women. That could have been a good burn, but you can tell they just wrote it in because they wanted to appeal to the women who loved Wonder Woman and Captain Marvel, since it comes right after a scene where Nightcrawler saves Jean Grey. Storm barely wins a fight to a mutant whose superpower is that he can make his dreadlocks longer and whip stuff with them. Nightcrawler has a Wolverine Berserker Rage moment where he gets super furious, screams in outrage, and kills a bunch of people. What triggered this outburst of fury? A mutant arresting task force soldier guy who told Nightcrawler that his son was a fan of his died. They had no other interactions beyond this. The mutant arresting task force soldiers are called the Mutant Containment Unit. They have huge patches on their uniform that say MCU, so yes, the MCU are literally the villains trying to stop the X-Men. Subtle. The Mutant Containment Unit exists for some reason, even though the public and the government love the X-Men and their promotion of mutant equality ever since they saved the day at the end of X-Men Apocalypse. Nobody ever mentions that Magneto destroyed every major city in the world and killed millions of people at the end of X-Men Apocalypse. Magneto started his own utopian society for mutants. In the comics, this utopia is on an asteroid in space. In this movie, it's in the woods. The plot of Land in the Woods was given to Magneto by the US government. Magneto has a super dramatic scene where he puts back on his helmet to show that he's Magneto again. It's broken in the next scene. Magneto wants to kill Jean because Jean accidentally killed Mystique, and Magneto is said to have loved Mystique, even though their only interactions have been about a week of training together, her one failed attempt to seduce him to make herself feel better after Professor X and Beast made her feel ugly, her leaving with him at the end of X-Men First Class only to ditch him before the beginning of X-Men Days of Future Past, Magneto shooting Mystique in Days of Future Past, and basically just them not being on the same side ever and barely ever being in the same room after that. True love. Mystique spends most of the movie in her human form, even though it goes against everything her character stands for. Beast spends most of the movie in his human form, even though it goes against everything his character stands for. Beast can change to and from his beast form at will now, and doesn't need to take special medicine to suppress his mutation. What a terrible curse. Oh, and even though Nicholas Hoult has only aged a few years between movies, the Beast makeup has significant age definition on it. Deadpool, Cable, Domino, and Negasonic Teenage Warhead do not make an appearance. Remember how Psylocke silently swore vengeance on the X-Men at the end of X-Men Apocalypse? She doesn't appear either. Remember how Mr. Sinister was teased in the credits of X-Men Apocalypse? He doesn't appear either. Remember how Jubilee was barely in X-Men Apocalypse because most of her scenes were cut? She doesn't appear either. Moira McTaggart, Stryker, Caliban, Rogue, Juggernaut, Sabretooth, Lady Deathstrike, Iceman, Angel, Blink, Colossus, Bishop, Warpath, Sunspot, and basically lots of cool people from the other movies don't appear either. Not even Callisto. There's a new mutant, however, who has the power to own 2 knives. She also claims that she can mind control people and appears to have a mind control battle with Professor X, but all they do is fight over who is mind controlling Nightcrawler. This fight causes Nightcrawler to teleport back and forth from the left and right of the 2 knives lady. I genuinely have no idea what was going on in that scene. She dies when she falls off a train. The camera doesn't even cut to the outside of the train. Mystique never uses her powers to disguise herself. Ever. Jean Grey does use her powers to disguise herself, mind-controlling everyone in a bar to see her as an old man. But then the villain of the movie appears in the bar and says things like, "Mind control won't work on me," right in front of the human bartender and the other patrons. Quicksilver rescues people in slow motion in one scene, only there's not an awesome song playing this time. Later, Quicksilver runs at Jean Grey, but she reveals that she can keep up with him and knocks him aside. You know, exactly like when Apocalypse did that to Quicksilver in X-Men Apocalypse. and exactly like when Superman did that to the Flash in Justice League. You know how Magneto has a big moment in every movie? In X-Men 1, he flew around the Statue of Liberty. In X-Men 2, he escaped from prison using the iron in a guard's blood. In X-Men 3, he lifted the Golden Gate Bridge. In X-Men First Class, he lifts a submarine. In X-Men Days of Future Past, he lifts a baseball stadium. And in X-Men Apocalypse, he destroys the entire world. Well, in this movie, his big moment is that he picks up one subway car. There's aliens in this movie. The Skrulls from Captain Marvel, basically, since they can shapeshift to disguise themselves as others. The aliens are inconsistently bulletproof. One of them is killed with a machine gun, but then a bunch regenerate, like Wolverine after a whole squad of soldiers empty their guns into them. Then those same ones that just regenerated are then killed when another guy shoots them immediately after. The aliens want to use the Phoenix Force to create a new planet for them, since theirs is destroyed and most of their species is dead. You know, exactly like the Kryptonians from Man of Steel. The aliens tell Jean that they are unable to control the Phoenix Force, but she can, and they tell her about how she can create worlds, so it seems like they want her to make worlds for them, even though she can't control it at all. Jean tells them that she doesn't think she'll ever be able to control the power and gives it willingly to the villains, who make it seem like their plan all along was to take it from her, even though they already said they know they can't control it. And no, it's never established that it can be controlled if given willingly or anything like that. After the villain takes the power, the mutant containment unit captures all of our heroes and puts them on a train. The aliens break into the train to try to capture Jean, even though they already took the Phoenix Force from her. Jean reveals that she still has the Phoenix Force inside her, even though the villain also has it, so I guess the villain only took some of it? Did they know they didn't take all of it and that's why they came back for Jean? How did they know? Whatever, not a big deal. The main alien can control the Phoenix Force now, even though they said they couldn't before. Jean can control the Phoenix Force now, even though she couldn't before, and she uses it to destroy a bad guy, put him back together, and then destroy him again like she's Kronika from Mortal Kombat or something. It's kind of awesome. Oh, by the way, the villain's name is Vuk or something. Yeah, Vuk. It's said like once and in an alien language that we read as a subtitle. Just once. Vuk tells Jean Grey that her emotions make her weak. Jean Grey says her emotions make her strong, and she gains complete control over the Phoenix Force that she already had in the last scene, making her glow and get all fiery, exactly like the end of Captain Marvel. You remember how in Captain Marvel, the Kree told her throughout the entire movie that she's too emotional, and some humans in flashbacks told her that too? And it's really cool when she realized that embracing her emotions is how she could become her most powerful, glowy, fiery self? Yeah, Dark Phoenix has none of that set up, but the exact same ending. No one ever tries to suppress Jean's emotions, and the villains never say that emotions are a reason they think humans are weak, or anything like that. Jean Grey gives Vuk an ironic punishment, giving her all the power of the Phoenix Force, knowing she can't control it, even though she was successfully controlling it in the past 2 scenes. And it works and makes her explode. You know, exactly like Indiana Jones 4 or The Crow. Jean then explodes for some reason, even though she doesn't have the Phoenix Force anymore. And in the very next scene, Jean narrates that she's still alive, but no longer has need of a physical body because she still has the Phoenix Force, even though she just gave it all away, I guess. The movie ends with a reveal that Professor X left the X-Men and is enjoying an outdoor restaurant in Paris. You know, exactly like the end of The Dark Knight Rises. We pan up to the sky and see a giant flaming bird flying across it, revealing that Jean Grey is still alive. Which we already knew because she told us in narration in the previous scene. And the secret hidden bonus 51st thing that happened in the movie. It feels so much like the only source material used when writing this movie was X-Men The Last Stand, as opposed to the Dark Phoenix comic. Jean Grey wears a red leather coat to show that she's turned bad, exactly like in The Last Stand. There's a big fight at her childhood home, exactly like in The Last Stand. And it was written by Simon Kinberg, exactly like in The Last Stand. Overall, I give this movie a strong recommendation. A million thumbs up. It was hilarious. And it's not like they're going to make any more anyway, no matter how much this one makes, since Disney bought it. The producer disowned it. The director admitted it was bad. Go see it. Thanks for listening.